If your pepper plants look decent on the surface, but the harvest is coming in thin, a handful of small fruits instead of the heavy clusters you were counting on, the trouble might not be what you think. I've watched this happen in backyard plots from California heat waves to wet English allotments, and in my own garden more seasons than I like to admit. You've got the soil worked, you're watering steady, maybe even side dressing with compost, yet the plants stall out, the blossoms drop, and the pests move in like they own the place. Most of us chase the usual fixes: more fertilizer, different watering schedule, another variety of seed. But after decades of growing peppers through short northern summers and scorching southern ones, I can tell you the real difference often comes down to one quiet decision most gardeners never think twice about: what you plant right beside them. The wrong neighbors quietly pull nutrients, invite pests, or leave the soil compacted and stressed. The right ones do the opposite. They team up, protect the roots, confuse the bugs, and let the peppers pour their energy into fruit instead of just surviving. This isn't some trendy garden hack. It's an old principle that actually works when you do it right, and it can easily triple the usable peppers you bring to the kitchen without spending another dollar on sprays or fancy amendments. Let me walk you through how it really plays out in a real garden, the kind most of us have: raised beds in the suburbs, allotments in Europe, or a few containers on a patio in the Midwest. We're not talking about magic. We're talking about simple pairings that handle the everyday pressures peppers hate most: aphids that show up overnight, root knot nematodes you can't even see until the plant wilts, slugs chewing holes after a rainy spell, and that brutal afternoon sun that cooks the fruit in July and August. Start with dill. A lot of folks overlook it because it's not flashy, but once you let it flower, it becomes one of the best bodyguards your peppers will ever have. Dill is what the extension services call an insectary plant. It draws in ladybugs, lacewings, and parasitic wasps by the dozens. Those beneficial insects live right there in the bed, patrolling day and night, picking off aphids and caterpillars before they ever get a chance to cluster on your pepper stems. I learned this the hard way one year in a wet spring when aphids hit my peppers early. I planted a single row of dill between the beds, and within 2 weeks, the ladybugs moved in like they'd been waiting for an invitation. The difference was night and day. And there's a soil bonus most people miss. Dill's deep taproot loosens compacted clay or heavy loam that peppers hate. Better drainage and air down there means the pepper roots can spread wider and pull up more of what they need. Just remember to let some of it bolt and flower. That's when the beneficials really show up. Right next to it, try oregano. This one works in a completely different way, and it's almost unfair how effective it is for the effort. Oregano puts out a strong aromatic scent that basically jams the radar many pests use to find peppers. Aphids and spider mites rely on smell to locate their next meal. Surround your peppers with a low carpet of oregano, and those signals get masked. The Royal Horticultural Society and university trials have shown aromatic herbs like this can cut pest pressure noticeably without any chemicals. But oregano does double duty. It spreads low and thick, acting as a living mulch right at the base of the peppers. That keeps soil moisture steady during dry spells, shades the root zone from midday heat, and slows down weeds that would otherwise steal water and nutrients. Peppers are picky about temperature swings at the roots. Too hot or too dry, and they drop blossoms fast. Oregano helps buffer that stress, so the plants stay productive longer into the season. Plant it close, let it sprawl, and you'll spend less time watering and weeding. Then there's basil, probably the one companion almost everyone has heard of, and for good reason. Basil releases volatile oils that many soft-bodied insects simply don't like. Grow it among the peppers, and you get a natural repellent zone that also happens to give you fresh leaves for your own kitchen all summer. Same warm, sunny conditions peppers love, so they get along perfectly. What surprises a lot of growers is how these three together already start changing the whole feel of the bed. You're not just sticking random plants in the ground. You're building the first layer of a system that handles pests, moisture, and soil health without you having to micromanage every day. I've had seasons where just these three cut my aphid problems in half and kept the plants setting fruit right through a heat wave that would normally shut them down. But we're only getting started. There are deeper layers that take this from helpful to the kind of pepper harvest people stop and ask you about at the garden gate. The ones that work underground, the ones that trap pests on purpose, and the tall plants that throw just the right amount of afternoon shade when the sun gets mean. And here's where most gardeners lose the advantage. They plant one or two companions and stop, never realizing the real payoff comes when everything works together like a small, self-reinforcing ecosystem. The soil stays cooler and looser. Beneficial insects move in and stay. Pests get confused, trapped, or eaten before they ever reach the peppers. The plants themselves stop wasting energy on stress and start loading up with fruit. I'll show you exactly how to layer the rest of these companions so you get that kind of result in your own space. Whether you're working with a 4x8 raised bed in Ohio, an allotment plot in the UK, or even a few large containers on a sunny balcony. But first, let's talk about the plants that handle the hidden problems you can't always see until it's too late. The ones you never spot until the plant starts yellowing and the fruit set drops off like someone flipped a switch. I'm talking about root knot nematodes, microscopic worms that live in the soil and chew up the roots of your peppers from the inside. You won't see them, but you'll sure feel the results. Stunted plants, weak yields, and the nagging sense that something underground is quietly robbing you. Marigolds are the answer most of us wish we'd known about years earlier. Not just any marigold. French marigolds are the ones the university extensions and the Royal Horticultural Society point to because their roots release a natural compound called alpha-terthionol straight into the soil. It's toxic to those nematodes before they ever get a chance to settle in. Plant them thick around the edges and right in among the peppers, and you're basically putting up an underground fence that lasts the whole season. I used to lose half my pepper patch to nematodes in the heavy clay soil of my old garden in the Midwest. One year I tried marigolds on a hunch, and the difference was so clear my neighbor asked what I'd done differently. Above ground, they pull in ladybugs and parasitic wasps too, so you're getting double protection. One layer below the soil, one above. It's the kind of quiet work that lets your peppers focus on making fruit instead of fighting for their lives. Right beside them, slip in some onions. People think of onions as a kitchen crop, not a pepper bodyguard, but they're one of the most practical companions you can use. Their strong sulfur smell throws off aphids, slugs, and even rabbits that might wander through after a rainy spell in a British allotment or wet Pacific Northwest summer. And when the onions eventually break down in the soil, they leave behind compounds that help suppress fungal issues, the same ones that cause root rot when the ground stays too damp. It's a small thing, but tucking onions into the gaps between pepper plants costs almost nothing and gives you fresh scallions or bulbs at the end of the season as a bonus. Just don't crowd them too close. Give them 6 inches, and they'll do their job without competing. Now here's something a lot of gardeners miss entirely: spinach. It seems like an odd match because peppers love heat and spinach prefers it cooler, but that's exactly why they work so well together. Spinach acts as a living mulch right at soil level. Its broad leaves shade the ground, cut down evaporation, and keep the root zone of the peppers from overheating during those brutal July afternoons that hit raised beds in Texas or southern France. Peppers can take warm air, but when the soil gets too hot, the plants start dropping blossoms like crazy. I've seen entire rows quit setting fruit in a single heat wave. Spinach keeps that root zone cooler and steadier. You can sow it early in spring around the young peppers, let it grow until the heat builds, then pull it or let it bolt, and it still does its job. In fall, it comes back for a second round when the nights cool down. It's one of those companions that quietly solves a problem most people blame on the weather or bad seed. And then there are nasturtiums, probably the cleverest trick in the whole companion planting book. These bright, trailing flowers are what gardeners call a trap crop. Aphids and whiteflies love them even more than they love peppers. Plant nasturtiums at the edges or trailing between the beds, and the pests head straight for them instead, leaving your peppers alone. But it gets better. The nasturtiums also draw in hoverflies and ladybugs that then feast on the aphids that showed up. So you're not just moving the problem, you're setting up a little destruction zone that actually reduces the pest population. I've used nasturtiums along the south side of pepper beds in containers on a sunny patio and watched the aphids concentrate there while the peppers stayed clean. Plus, the flowers and leaves are edible with a nice peppery bite, so you're harvesting 2 crops from the same space. Just keep them from smothering the peppers. Give them room to trail outward and they'll stay in their lane. By the time you've got dill, oregano, basil, marigolds, onions, spinach, and nasturtiums working together, you're already looking at a bed that handles most of the everyday headaches on its own. But there's still one more layer that really pushes the yields higher, especially in places where the sun beats down hard in the afternoon. Carrots might not seem like they belong with peppers at first glance, but their long tap roots do something peppers can't. They break up compacted soil deep down where pepper roots never reach on their own. In raised beds that have settled over a couple seasons, or in allotment soil that gets walked on, those carrot roots open channels for air and water. The peppers end up with better drainage and easier access to nutrients without you having to double dig anything. I've seen it turn mediocre pepper plants into the kind that make people stop and stare. And when you let a few carrots flower, they bring in ground beetles that hunt soil pests you didn't even know were there. Just be gentle when you harvest the carrots later. Pull them carefully so you don't yank up the neighboring pepper roots. All of this is building toward something bigger than just sticking pretty plants next to your peppers. It's creating a small, self-supporting system where each layer protects the next. The ground stays cooler and looser. Pests get confused or eaten before they ever reach the main crop. Moisture stays where it belongs instead of evaporating on a hot day. And the peppers themselves stop wasting energy on stress and start loading up with fruit the way they're supposed to. Most people never get to see that kind of result because they try one companion, maybe 2, and call it a day. The real payoff shows up when everything works in concert. And we're not even at the last piece yet. The tall plants that throw just the right amount of afternoon shade when the sun turns mean in midsummer. That's the part a lot of us in hotter regions, or even in a good European heat wave, never think about until the fruit starts getting those bleached, papery patches called sun scald. but I'll get to that in a minute. Because once you understand how to place that final layer, the whole bed starts behaving like a proper little ecosystem instead of a collection of individual plants fighting the same battles every season. Tomatoes might seem like the last plant you'd put next to peppers. After all, they're both nightshades, and they do pull some of the same nutrients from the soil. A lot of gardeners have heard the old rule that you should never plant family members together, and in many cases that advice holds up. But here's where experience changes the story. In the right spot, tomatoes actually give peppers something almost no other companion can: real afternoon shade when the sun gets vicious. Peppers handle warm air fine, but direct, blazing afternoon sun in July and August can scorch the fruit and leave those ugly bleached patches we call sun-scald. I've pulled fruits off plants in my own garden in the South that looked like they'd been hit with a blowtorch. A taller tomato plant, positioned on the west or southwest side of the bed, throws just enough dappled shade across the peppers during the hottest part of the day. The peppers keep setting fruit longer, the skin stays smooth and marketable, and you stretch the harvest well into the weeks when everyone else is watching theirs stall out. Tomatoes also release some of their own volatile compounds that seem to throw off aphids and whiteflies in the immediate area. It's not a miracle shield, but it adds one more quiet layer of protection. The trick is spacing and placement. Give both crops room, at least 18 inches between plants in a raised bed, more if you're in heavier soil. And make sure air can still move between them so you don't trap moisture and invite blight or mildew, the very diseases that love crowded nightshades. In cooler European allotments, or short-season northern gardens, this pairing works especially well because the tomatoes act like a living windbreak, too. And then there's garlic. If I could only keep one companion in the pepper bed year after year, this would be the one. Garlic is straight-up potent. It pumps out sulfur compounds, especially allicin, that create a chemical barrier in both the air and the soil. Aphids, spider mites, whiteflies, they all hate it. The smell alone disrupts their ability to find the peppers, and many gardeners who plant garlic liberally through their beds report almost no need to reach for any other intervention. But the real power is underground. Those same sulfur compounds have natural antifungal properties that help keep root rot at bay, especially in wet springs or in allotments that stay damp after rain. Root rot is one of those silent killers that shows up as yellowing leaves and wilting just when you think everything is going well. Garlic, growing right there beside the peppers, is quietly protecting the root zone the whole season long. Plant the cloves in fall for an early summer harvest, or in early spring if you're in a colder zone. Tuck them at the edges of the bed or scatter them between the peppers. They don't compete much for space, and they come out of the ground before the peppers really take off. In my experience, the beds with garlic have noticeably fewer pest problems, and the peppers stay greener longer, even when the weather turns hot and humid. Now let's pull all these pieces together into something you can actually use tomorrow morning in your own garden, whether it's a 4x8 raised bed in the suburbs, a classic allotment plot in the UK, or even a cluster of large containers on a sunny patio. The secret isn't planting one or two of these and hoping for the best. The real results come when you think in layers and zones, building a small ecosystem that works with the peppers instead of leaving them to fight every stress alone. Start at ground level, right around the base of each pepper plant. That's where you put the low-spreading companions, oregano, spinach, and basil. They act as living mulch, keeping the soil cooler, holding moisture during dry spells, and masking the scent that draws aphids and spider mites. In hot regions like the southern U.S. or Mediterranean Europe, this layer alone can stop blossom drop and keep the plants productive when the temperature spikes. In cooler northern gardens, it buys you extra weeks by protecting against sudden temperature swings after a rainy spell. Next, build the perimeter. Marigolds, nasturtiums, and garlic go around the outside edges like a protective fence. Marigolds handle the nematodes you can't see. Nasturtiums act as the trap that lures pests away and then calls in the beneficial insects to finish the job. And garlic creates that sulfur barrier nothing wants to cross. Plant them densely, marigolds every foot or so, and you'll see the difference in the first season. Then fill the gaps inside the bed with dill, onions, and carrots. Dill brings in the army of ladybugs and lacewings once it flowers. Onions confuse pests with their strong smell and add sulfur back to the soil when they break down. Carrots loosen the ground deep down with their taproots, so the pepper roots can reach more water and nutrients without you having to turn the whole bed over every year. These middle plants do their work quietly, while everything else is happening above and below. Finally, on the west side, the side that gets the hottest afternoon sun in most American and European gardens, put your taller tomatoes, or even a few pole beans if you prefer. They throw that crucial shade exactly when the peppers need it most, and they add one more layer of airborne pest confusion. When these layers are all working at once, something shifts. The soil stays cooler and looser. Pests get repelled, trapped, or eaten before they ever reach the main crop. Moisture doesn't evaporate as fast on a hot day. The peppers stop wasting energy fighting aphids, nematodes, heat, or compaction, and they start pouring everything into fruit. I've seen beds go from a handful of peppers per plant to heavy clusters that make people stop at the garden gate and ask what on earth I did differently. Most of us never get to that point because we try one companion, see a small improvement, and figure that's good enough. The real jump in yield happens when the whole system clicks into place. And the beautiful part is, you don't have to do it all at once. Start with whatever you have room for this season, a row of basil and marigolds, a few garlic cloves at the edge, and watch how the bed begins to take care of itself. There's one more thing worth knowing before you head out to the garden, though. This kind of companion planting isn't a one-year miracle. It's a long game. The first season you'll notice fewer pests and steadier plants. By the second and third year, as the soil biology improves and the beneficial insects make your garden their permanent home, the results get almost ridiculous. That's when the harvest really starts to feel like it's feeding people instead of just looking pretty. You don't have to wait years to see the difference, though. Even if your peppers are already in the ground and the season is rolling along, it's not too late to add a few of these companions right now. Slip some basil or oregano into the empty spots at the base, drop marigold seedlings around the perimeter, or push garlic cloves into the soil at the edges. The plants respond fast. Within a couple of weeks, you'll start noticing fewer aphids, steadier moisture levels, and blossoms that actually hold on instead of dropping in the heat. I've done this mid-season more times than I can count, usually after realizing I'd repeated the same old mistake of growing peppers in a bare bed like they were on their own. The relief when those first layers kick in is real. Suddenly, the garden feels like it's working with you instead of against you. One quick correction worth mentioning here, because I see it trip people up every year. Don't overcrowd the bed thinking more companions equal more protection.
Too many plants jam together and you block airflow, trap humidity, and actually invite the very fungal problems garlic and onions are trying to prevent. Give everything breathing room. 12 to 18 inches between most companions in a raised bed, a little more in heavier allotment soil. It's one of those small adjustments that keeps the whole system healthy instead of creating new headaches. And here's something most gardeners never hear until they've lost a season or two. The myth that all nightshades have to stay far apart is only half true. Yes, tomatoes and peppers share some nutrient needs and disease risks, but when you position the tomatoes carefully on the hot side for shade and keep good spacing, the benefits far outweigh the drawbacks. I used to separate them strictly because that's what the old book said.
Then I tried the shade trick in a hot summer and never went back. The peppers produced longer, the fruit looked better, and the bed as a whole stayed more productive. If you ignore the companions entirely and keep doing what most of us did for years, clean beds, heavy feeding, hoping for the best, the same pattern repeats. Thin harvests, more pests showing up uninvited, and that quiet frustration when you're picking a handful of peppers while the grocery store ones look twice as good. It adds up. A single bad season might not break you, but over time it wears on the whole idea of growing your own food. The good news is the fix is simple, cheap, and right in front of you. Start small this season. Pick 3 or 4 from the list, maybe basil and marigolds if you're tight on space, or add garlic and oregano if you already have room in the raised beds. Plant them where they fit naturally, and watch how the bed begins to take care of itself. Next year, you'll add another layer, maybe the nasturtiums trailing along the edge, or carrots tucked in the gaps. Season by season, the soil gets better, the beneficial insects settle in, and the peppers start delivering the kind of harvest that actually feeds people instead of just filling a few jars. That's the part I love most about this approach. It turns a backyard garden or allotment plot into something self-reliant. Fewer trips to the garden center for sprays, less wasted effort chasing problems that never should have started, and more real food on the table from your own soil. If you've been nodding along and thinking this might explain why your peppers have been underperforming, do me a favor. Drop the word "grow" in the comments below. It tells me the message landed and helps other gardeners who are dealing with the same quiet struggles find this. And if it helped even a little, tap that like button. It really does make a difference in getting practical advice like this in front of more people who want their garden to work harder for them. Thanks for spending the time with me today. Now get out there, put a few of these companions in the ground, and let the bed do some of the heavy lifting for a change. I'll see you in the next one.